Welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and today I'm here with Trick Slattery, George Ortega, and David Joseph. We're going to talk about the moral implications of belief or disbelief in free will. Trick, what do you have to say?
I think there's a lot of implications that are involved in this topic for morality itself, and in some of the implications of the belief in free will, what it does for morality or against it, really, and the disbelief in free will and what it does for it. So there's a lot of things, a lot of areas we can go into here. One of the areas we could kind of address first is this claim that if we don't believe in free will, it's going to lead to problems with people doing unethical things. That it's going to be some kind of excuse for them to do morally wrong things. There's certain studies that are really horrible studies. They're contrived studies that basically try to change a person's belief temporarily, which you can't really do for one thing. So basically, they have this person read a deterministic dialogue, a dialogue that explains to them how in a world that with physics and all this and environment and genetics all lead to the person's decisions. So they kind of try to influence people's disbelief in free will, and then they test them and they determine that they are cheating more or some other negative thing. So what tends to happen here is people's initial reactions that are being on display here. So people are initially thinking fatalistically. So they're not really understanding the whole free will debate. They don't really know about what determinism is or indeterminism. So they're just taking their first initial reactions, which are to do stupid stuff, basically. And then they're saying, oh, look, free will, telling people free will doesn't exist is a bad thing. But in the long run, it's not. In the long run, there's all these other moral implications that we can address that you have to understand that this free will doesn't exist for. So what do you think,
Yeah.
George?
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about that podcast, Very Bad Wizards, that, actually they just uploaded an episode dealing with moral responsibility, and they actually address that study by, I think it's Voos and Schooler, and they make that same point. In other words, like, when they were priming the disbelief in free will group, basically they just said, well, yeah, you're a pack of neurons, you're just like, whatever. But when they were priming the free will belief group, they used the additional prime that, like, our free will beliefs allow us to do the moral thing. So in other words, they were priming morality in one group and not priming it in another. That's one of the flaws of the study. But yeah, I mean, the idea behind this is like, yes, studies, I think, that attempt to ascribe immorality to the disbelief in free will. They also kind of completely ignore, I think, one of the major reasons for crime throughout the world, and that is, like, a lot of crime, a lot of, like, conflict results from one person blaming the other. A lot of violence, whether it's domestic violence, violence in groups, you have. So to the extent that we overcome this free will belief, that could really drastically minimized.
Exactly. So it's, yeah, the whole blame thing is where, it is the ethical or moral implication that we're trying to explain to people, that as soon as you take away the blame, it leads to higher levels of equality. People understand that others aren't to blame for their lower, status or even, more deserving necessarily of their really high status. So it just in general creates more equality in the world. And then obviously blame leads to hatred and all this other things that lead to people harming other people. So it's all, this is all part of the whole moral implication. So when people cite these studies that are, and the important part of these studies is they're really, really, really not studies of determinists. They're studies of people who have a belief in free will, who are confused, basically. So they confuse them with a text, which is a temporary confusion. But it's like kind of like telling a creationist that giving them an article to read on atheism and then determining that they're now more kind of leaning towards that way, but it doesn't really happen that way. So obviously there's a lot of religious people who think atheism is bad, that if there's no God, they should do bad things, and right, or they would do bad things. Not that they should, but they would do bad things. So that God is the one thing that's keeping them from doing the bad things.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you were to able to convince them otherwise, then you have a problem here. But it's just an initial convincing, because most atheists don't think that way. So it's the same thing with determinists or Hardian compatibilists like me. We don't think that way because we understand the implications at a higher level. We don't just go ahead.
Yeah, and Trick, I just wanted to jump in there. The point is, if you're going to do something, you have to have the desire there already to do this thing. Now, there might be somebody who wants to go and murder and rape and steal and all that, and the only reason they don't is because they believe God will punish them. So what this means, it doesn't mean that we want them to keep believing in God. What it means is stay away from them, because they might figure out there's no God and then start doing those things.
Yeah,
or give them a better
but the point is you're basically trying to change the mindset of somebody that has a wrong mindset to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So the person isn't thinking right on the subject. They don't understand that this isn't the case, basically, for morality or whatever. So they have these other bad ideas that come to the forefront, and that's part of what causes these problems. It's this uneducation. It's a way of not educating people on the topic. We, on the other hand, want to educate people on the free will topic and its implications. And as soon as you educate them on the implications as well, you have a totally different situation where it kind of bypasses these problems of people not understanding the implications, because they're just being oppressed upon for a temporary 5-minute period in which they're reading an article.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It doesn't give them an actual understanding of the topic.
And I think the other part is that, like, it's not just about, explaining to them that we don't have a free will. It's also, it's absolutely necessary, especially when testing for the morality, to explain to them, what we who understand this, much more comprehensively, just understand so well, that simply, like, not having a free will is not an excuse for doing what we want. In other words, like, that's an essential part of the explanation that we don't have a free will. But that's because that's, and again, these are priming experiments. So to the extent that people both understand that free will is an illusion and that doesn't give them license to do what they want, then I think they will do as well, or perhaps better, than the free will believers on these tests that they come up with.
Yeah, I mean, I'd actually like to see a study of actual determinists, people who've understood this concept for a few years, and then see, have them run the same type of studies and see what they come up with, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be just the opposite. So,
what would be a really awesome study that people really need to put into practice is, like, give people, like, a survey on various topics, like, say right before they start a 4-year college or something, and then have them do the same survey or whatever afterwards, and see how much their answers have changed based on what they've learned at school in their courses. Because people change, and there's always a cause for what changes their mind, and I really think people need to do follow-ups, after a long time of learning, not just like what they've been doing, like just throw a bunch of information and see how this influences people. But you don't know what those people would have answered on some quiz or whatever if you hadn't given them any information. You might have still gotten the same results. How do you know?
Excellent. David, again, like, most people will assert that, like, disbelieving in free will is immoral, that it'll lead to a breakdown of civilization and all. What would your argument be for asserting that actually, free will belief is actually the more immoral of the two perspectives?
Well, I've had the argument that having no free will just give everyone an excuse to just run around and kill each other. Basically, it's very much like Trigg said. It's similar to the belief in God. If there's a belief in God, then God's going to punish me, and I can't go around just randomly killing people. But I'm not sure on that one, because sometimes I kind of lean towards the idea of thinking, well, if your belief in God is stopping you from doing something bad, then perhaps that's a belief that you're going to need to keep hold of, not just for your sake, but for my sake too, perhaps. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I think what we realize, or what we learn, is that while sometimes for some people the belief in free will does motivate ethical behavior, I think for many of us it's simply not necessary. But the stronger point, I think, may be that you have that advantage, then you weigh it against the major disadvantage of the free will belief leading us to blame and vilify and condemn and want to seek vengeance toward people who are really fundamentally innocent. And then so that to really hold someone responsible who's not responsible at all, I think that's a major act of immorality.
Definitely. So it'd be like along the lines of someone who believes in God. It may have something to do with him not running around committing acts of violence, but at the same time, he's going to hold beliefs that may be harmful in other ways due to that belief in God. So perhaps he's against gays, or something like that. Something along those lines.
That's a good point. Yeah, actually, with the belief in God and free will comes the belief in that, like, some people are so horrible that they deserve to suffer eternally, and that belief is so absurdly hateful, and it doesn't just reflect on the person; it also reflects on, like, this God that's supposed to be all good and all, that he could do something so completely immoral.
Right. Okay. Yeah. You've explained it to me. Yeah. I think I'm there now.
Trick also, like, in terms of, like, experimenting with this in the lab, there was an article in Scientific American in 2012, the cover story they had, and in it they, according to them, about 30% of the world doesn't believe in free will. I don't, I really haven't, done research into this. I think the article was written by this guy Christoph Koch, and I just haven't looked into it. But, like, if we really want to empirically, in labs, just see what the difference is morally, like, between free will believers and unbelievers, then that's, I think, what we have to do. We have to kind of, like, and it may be geographically a bit difficult since they may be, like, in other parts of the world, but, like, like we're saying, the priming effects that they currently use with Westerners, with people who believe in free will, are just not strong enough or valid enough.
That I never heard of. So there's a study out there that says there's about 30% of the world's population that doesn't believe in free will.
Well, it's not a study per se, but it's cited in the Scientific American cover story on free will that they published in 2012.
Interesting. I wonder what cultures these are. Like, if these are, like, some certain kind of tribes or something, or That's interesting.
I'm wondering if it has something to do with, Buddhism, no self, maybe, or Hinduism, karma, some sort of
Oh yeah,
weird,
yeah.
those Eastern things. That's what I'm suspicious. It might not be the type. It might be like a religious fatalism, no free will. It may not necessarily be what we're talking about.
I think
Right.
you're right. I think, for example, some like with Buddhism, within Buddhism, there's this idea of no self. If we don't have a permanent, consistent self, then we can't really have a free will, that's attributed to that self.
Yeah.
But all right, but guys, let's see if we can do some research on this, because if we can promote this apparent fact that 30% of the world doesn't believe in free will, then that would really, I think, encourage social scientists and philosophers to really recognize, to study these people. And chances are, I would guess these people are probably acting more morally than free will believers. So that would be a very powerful way to demonstrate, not just with the lab, but with real life results, that the disbelief in free will is not, the civilization collapsing, immoral danger that so many people, attempt to portray it as.
Right,
Yeah.
and I think it actually leads to more compassion in the world, and I've experienced this myself. For me, I think as soon as I started disbelieving in free will, and I did so strongly, I started becoming more compassionate towards other people and their circumstances that they're in.
Absolutely, and doesn't that apply to ourselves also? Don't we become more compassionate? I mean, we do things that are wrong all the time, and we tend to blame ourselves, and if we blame ourselves, we think that we deserve punishment, so we punish ourselves. So I mean, it leads to a lot of just understanding of other people's and ourselves as well.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it really is interesting, because what I've noticed is that people don't do any good, like with knowing the cause of something, because I think what's happening is, they look, well, this person drove drunk and killed people, without thinking about the background causes. And it's true, you can't always know the background causes, and yet I think what people are uncomfortable about is they have to realize, wait a minute, there may be religious beliefs that are contributing to this person's behavior, and people don't want the word to get out about that, because, well, then that means people will be trying to eliminate religion, which of course people are, but you know what I'm saying, because then you start, there's all these things that are harmful in society that lead a person to this bad behavior that we don't want, and yet people are unwilling to get to the root causes of things. And I guess, I don't know why that is, but
Chandler, you raise a really, really important point. I mean, unfortunately, for example, here in the United States, 80-90% of the population believe in a higher power. Most generally they believe in God. And I think most people believe in a God that's benevolent, that's good. And so one of our challenges is, to the extent we understand that we don't have a free will, yes, it's like some people will claim, well, to overcome the belief in free will basically negates morality. But no, it doesn't negate morality. It basically shifts it from human beings to, theologically, within the perspective of God believers, to this God that, again, people believe is all good. All of a sudden, we're telling people no. When we do evil, when the most evil people that have lived have done their evil, it's actually God's will. It's actually God doing that. That's, I think, one of the strong psychological challenges that we're going to have to find a way of overcoming, if we're going to help God believers to transcend or overcome this belief in free will.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one, George. That's one thing that I think is an uphill battle for us, to be honest, especially
right.
with yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've come up with one way of absolving God. I think I've mentioned it to you guys before. It's not completely satisfactory, but it might help. It's the idea that, like, if we hold God to be eternal, if we hold reality, the universe to be eternal, never having had a beginning, well, that might be a way of absolving God, because in order to I think blame or hold, even God responsible for evil, I think we'd have to come up with a precise moment in time where God decided that, he's going to create evil, or that God decided that he's going to, like, make us human beings do evil through this causal chain of events, or however. But if time just endlessly regresses back and never stops, we never reach that point. So, again, it's not completely satisfactory, but it does absolve even God.
Yeah.
That's the problem that I see, is that people don't want they don't want to think that God, if God existed, that he wouldn't have free will either. so it's a double problem then. So
Yeah.
right now, go ahead, Chandler.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to what George was saying there because, well, yeah, because I think that I think the infinite regress is true. Like it just goes back infinitely, and so yeah, it's not like that. There's a time at which there was a first causer. I don't believe in a first cause. So very simple. I don't believe in a beginning of all things. Even the Big Bang wouldn't have been the beginning of all things if there was a Big Bang. I don't know. So whether it's the Big Bang or God, whatever. That's the thing, is everyone's like, well, it had to begin somewhere, and I said, well, says who? And
yeah, I mean, it could be either or. It could have either started at some point, or it could be an infinite regress. They're both kind of problematic ideas. So one is basically asserting an acausal event. The other one is asserting these events that just go on infinitely. So it's hard to wrap our mind around both of those.
However, I do have an interesting method. Like, let's say you do believe in a first cause, like some god or something. Well, then you might get angry and blame that first cause for choosing to create evil and suffering and pain. Okay, well, let's suppose that's true. Well, what can you do about it? Well, yeah, you can't correct the first cause that put it all in motion. There's nothing you can do about that. However, what it at least does is, let's say you do believe in this evil first cause. Well, it still takes the blame off from the other human beings around you. And that's a very good thing, regardless of whether you are blaming something way out there in the past billions of years ago. That still takes away the hatred and blame and inequality among human beings. So it's still good.
Oh yeah, David, you were talking before about, like, our hedonic imperative, the fact that we're, like, hardwired biologically to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Could you relate that to this issue of morality, and kind of, like, explain how that propensity in us human beings would kind of, like, prevent that collapse in civilization that free will believers fear would happen as we overcome the belief in free will?
Actually, I was going to ask you to kind of clarify a couple of things for me before I could give an answer on that.
Okay.
So like the hedonic principle is the idea that we believe things that lead to the greatest amount of pleasure. Is that kind of like along the lines?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if I believe that due to certain structural violence going on in places like Africa and all over the world, that people are dying due to poverty and hunger, that's a belief that I can't see how that benefits me in some way. So how do I relate that to the hedonic principle?
Oh, David, I'm not sure I understood you. You're saying if you believe that certain people in other parts of the world, I didn't get the other part of that.
Like if I believe a certain amount of people are going to die this year due to hunger and malnutrition, That's a belief I hold. Yet it doesn't give me any kind of comfort. It doesn't give me any kind of pleasure. So why would I not just simply kind of believe the opposite of that?
Oh, okay, all right, yes. And then the answer to that is like basically part of this kind of like greatest, pleasure or whatever applies to our conscience. In other words, many of us would, given the choice of doing something that we're going to like really feel good about and doing the right thing, because like feeling good about something might, entail pain to other people. Many of us will choose to do what's going to like give us less pleasure, a certain amount of pain, because it's the right thing, because we derive more pleasure from satisfying our conscience than from doing whatever pleasant activity we might be considering.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, and on the other side of that coin, there are a lot of people that what they'll do because of that depresses them or makes them sad is they'll partition it away. So it's you see this in the whole factory farming situation. People don't want to observe what's actually going on in factory farms. But they'll eat what's on their plate. So they'll eat this nice juicy steak, but they won't think about or try to think about, and they'd hate to watch a video of what's actually going on in the factory farm. So they partition it out of their mind because it's unpleasant to them. So they're trying to move away from that unpleasant state. So there are some problems with that, but another thing is a lot of people do like to understand what is also true. So they don't want to partition away the bad things because this understanding of what is true is important to them, and it gives them happiness as well.
Yeah. Hey, Trick, I want to respond to what you said there about, like factory farms and stuff, because I have gone online and looked at really, really awful videos of these various things. And I guess in my case, I might be the person who, wants to know what's true, even though it does hurt to see it. I don't want to just take someone's word for it that it's bad. I have to know how bad.
That's because you have a desire, though. It gives you desire or pleasure to know that you can do something about these problems in the world, right? So
exactly.
You want to find out the information, so you don't do the thing that is the negative, and that's what your psychology leads you to. Exactly. So it's all directed by this principle in some degree, that you're trying to do what is best for you, what is the thing that you would find most pleasing, and that would be a state where these things didn't exist, right, in the world.
Yes, and I guess that's true. It really gives me more pleasure to do what I can to not be part of contributing to that, at least.
Right, and that's because you understand that it's important that we know the facts about the world, whereas some people, they partition that away in their mind because it's too disturbing to them. But we need to, I think part of the thing that we need to do is to get people to see how it's important that they see the negative as well, but for the actual pleasure that they'll receive when they fix these problems in the world. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, it's almost the pleasure of fixing the problems, making efforts towards eliminating these problems, in a way can almost be addictive.
Right. So we have to move people away from the pleasure of ignorance, basically, to the pleasure of fixing.
And also the other part of that is like to hopefully persuade people to have more faith in the truth of what the facts of reality, as opposed to a belief. In other words, like, absolutely.
Yeah, because the truth is actually what allows us to fix the problem. So if we don't have the truth, we can't fix what we don't know. So we have to have the truth so we can work with the truth to make things better for us in the long run.
Chandler, we're running out of time. You want to wrap it up?
Okay, you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion. We hope you've enjoyed.